Being a gamer over 30, I felt this moment was a long time coming. To me, playing games is more than just a pastime or distraction. I play games for the unique experiences it offers. More interactive than any book, more personal than any movie, games are extremely subjective and our personal attachment to them heavily dictates how we perceive these games, which is why I find them so interesting to discuss. I believe a game's reception is largely dependent on our real life circumstances at the time of playing it. Certain games that you may have felt indifferent to might hit completely different at another point in your life. Now, what I'm about to discuss today might not be as serious or life-altering as that, but I felt like my perception of games was about to change for what might have been the rest of my life going forward. I felt myself reaching the point where I was no longer getting any joy from playing new games. For example, Nioh 3, a game that I've been champing at the bit to get my hands on, failed to hold my attention even though it's the best one in the series yet. Resident Evil 4 Remake, a game that I return to whenever I want an instant kick of dopamine, wasn't doing it for me anymore. Then I turned to new stuff that I wouldn't typically play and other games that I missed in the past, and I found that I couldn't get into any of them. I would give them about an hour or two before jumping off to the next one. Nothing was gripping me. If you look back on my videos this year, the only game I've beaten and made a video on is Cresol Theatre of Idols, which I thought was surprisingly good from the small studio Vermeer. The Dragon Age video was technically written and done last year and only released this year. And Dino Crisis 3 was so bad that I personally couldn't play it, but I watched my brother play it from start to finish. I looked back at the start of the year and I believe certain circumstances didn't allow me to get much playtime. And as the days turned to weeks, my free time, however little it was, didn't include much gaming. Instead, I turned to reading books and D&D, Dungeons and Dragons for those of you who don't know. And if you've ever dabbled in D&D, you know how time consuming that can be. At that point, gaming took a backseat in my life in a way that I've not experienced since I was in high school. Actually, to be honest, all the while I was in high school, I was always thinking about games. But I had to cut it out to focus on my schooling. This time, I simply wasn't thinking of playing games, and I feel that if I just kept at it a bit longer, I would have turned into that guy that only plays the biggest game of the year. No hate against those people, I understand that not everyone has the luxury of free time on their hands, but gaming so far has played such a huge role in my life that I would never want to give it up. Look, this might be the longest intro I've done so far, but to get to the chase, all this meandering leads to the game that got me out of that funk and back into gaming. And strangely, it came from one of the worst received games I've covered on this channel, only being beaten out by the abysmal Dino Crisis 3. But without further ado, let's discuss how The Lord of the Rings War in the North reinvigorated my enthusiasm for gaming.
My orcs will be ready. These lands have known peace for too long. They will soon feel the Dark Lord's wrath.
The Lord of the Rings War in the North is an action RPG developed by Snowblind Studios, who was absorbed by Monolith in 2012. Monolith, for those who need a refresher, is famous for developing games like Condemned 1 and 2, Fear 1 and 2, and the excellent Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War follow-up. Sadly, Monolith itself was dissolved in 2025, along with the long-awaited Wonder Woman game that was rumored to include the Nemesis system, which, if you don't know, is a brilliant gameplay mechanic that Warner Brothers has selfishly patented and did nothing with since doing so. But that's besides the point. War in the North takes place, quite obviously, in Lord of the Rings universe, set in a time that takes place alongside the original trilogy. From what I understand, it's that it's not exactly canon, but might as well be, as it really doesn't interfere with the sequence of events of the trilogy. In fact, it runs well alongside the movies, letting you play out all the scenarios that supposedly held back Sauron's forces while Frodo's mission was carried out. Picking up from the Prancing Pony, where Aragorn is awaiting the party of hobbits, all the way to when Frodo reaches the end of his journey. You don't get to really experience any major plot points of the movies, but you do hear of them through interactions with the main characters like Frodo, Gandalf and Elrond, to name a few. You get to visit some of the iconic locations like Bree, the Barrow Downs, Rivendell and Mirkwood, among others. The story itself, while nothing amazing, is surprisingly interesting, but to be honest, I believe the movie set all the groundwork. I'm no super fan, but I still found it easy to enjoy the story. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you the game is amazing and to jump on if you get the chance. No, War in the North is a hard one to recommend. While I genuinely enjoyed my time with it, I cannot say your average player will enjoy it. If you've seen my Gotham Knights video, you know where I'm headed with this one. You see, it's as fun as you make it. I went into this one expecting nothing more than an average hack and slash game set in the Lord of the Rings universe. Instead, I got a fairly competent RPG action adventure that appeals to my 30-year-old sensibilities. Now bear with me for a second while I go on this quick tangent. And obviously everything I'm about to say is my opinion and how I feel about the gaming landscape right now. The way I see it, I feel like games wow me less and less each year. Modern large titles are hedging their bets on tried and true strategies. Game makers are either riffing off each other or pulling beloved features from one another, or they're constantly returning to the same well for a guaranteed slam dunk. I've said this in another video before, but I think there's a lack of creativity in AA and AAA titles these days. Not to mention the sheer absence of AA in recent years. But I do see hope on the horizon as AAA itself is becoming rarer by the day, which leaves smaller titles open to pick up that space and hopefully do so with more enthusiasm for experimentation. While I'm on the subject, I feel indie games are in a similar boat. Most indie games are now simply rip-offs of other indie games with a slight twist. Obviously this doesn't apply to all games, but what I mean is the place where we expect to see the most creativity is now also content in copying their peers' homework. Once a lane is proven lucrative, it's the one they follow until it's exhausted and we as players turn on it. How many indie games are just Stardew Valley with a twist, which is just Harvest Moon with a twist? Look, I'm not hating on the indie scene. In fact, indie is doing so well that larger studios are just stealing features and ideas from them. But for me, the reason why I don't dabble all too much in indies is that they tend to provide a very specific experience. One that usually does one thing really well while not offering much beyond that one really well executed gameplay mechanic or conceit. This point, funny enough, ties back to the War in the North. You see, while I can get everything I enjoyed about this game in many other games, I can't seem to find them all in one place. One game to rule them all, you might say. Specifically, what I mean is a linear split-screen action RPG looter. Now, there's two major contenders that get close but still don't make the cut, and those two are Borderlands and the Diablo series. Let's start with Borderlands. If I were to put a number to the amount of hours I've put into the series as a whole, I would say it's probably approaching 500, if not past that. I have a long history with the Borderlands series and it still remains among the best split-screen games I've ever played. As for Diablo, while I do enjoy most aspects of the game, I feel the combat, as satisfying as it can feel sometimes, is not nearly engaging or strategic as something like Borderlands or War in the North. Most encounters play like an ability cooldown minigame. Once again, no hate, just recounting my experience with the game. In fact, I plan on revisiting Diablo fairly soon to compare games. This brings us to War in the North, a game that checked all the boxes of the exact experience I was looking for at the time when I needed it most. A game that was quick and easy to get into. By that I mean not taking an hour to explain how things work and overwhelming you with exposition of features and mechanics before you even get to the core gameplay loop. In my opinion, this is such an annoying part of getting into modern games that I find it off-putting. Personally, I struggle with information overload, which is to say that when there's too much information being thrown at me all at once, I tend to mentally check out. Meaning, I might bounce off a game because of the sheer amount of front-loading it does, robbing me of a great gaming experience. But I digress. This game was simple in presentation, and within a few minutes, we were off to the races, decapitating orcs and severing limbs. Which brings me to the next point. The combat, however mediocre it might seem, was engaging enough to warrant a little more than simply spamming A and waiting for ability cooldowns. Certain enemy attacks required dodging or countering, meaning you had to be alert when dealing with larger enemies or risk being overwhelmed. Strategy rewarded you with both bigger kill chains, easier crowd management and XP rewards. Overall, combat provided a reasonable level of challenge that I never expected from this game, and honestly another reason why I stuck with it. I often say how a good level of resistance can elevate a game and force engagement from the player. Beyond the combat challenge and ease of introduction, another aspect that hooked me was the RPG elements like character customization and loot acquisition. Getting into this game, we had no idea it had these features, so we were pleasantly surprised when we discovered there were skill trees. From that point on, it was game over. It didn't take long before we were comparing damage numbers and kill counts. While I'm not a fan of keeping score in a game when it throws it in my face, I mentioned how I hate combo counters in games like Devil May Cry, I do enjoy a bit of light competition between mates. And character customization was better than I expected. Gear sets were varied in style and traits, allowing you to create some really fun builds. It might not be as deep as something like Diablo, but it done more than enough to scratch that itch. Lastly, I enjoyed the linear level design. This did well to keep things moving forward, which is something I really appreciate and find myself looking for more and more these days. Overall, it took about 14 hours to beat, and that to me is perfect for a game such as this. Now, let's discuss the catch. You may look back on everything I said about War in the North and think, wow, that actually sounds like a fun time. And for some of you, that might actually be the case. If this video persuaded you to give this game a chance, then I'm glad this gem that brought me so much joy was able to do the same for you. But be warned, some of you might never see the end of this game, and it won't even be your fault, because this game is buggy as all hell. And I'm not talking about the endearing funny Bethesda type bugs. I'm talking about the actual game breaking, halting your progress, locking you into a level with no way out, time to restart the whole game type bugs. This unfortunately happened to us. Twice. The first time I was relatively early in our second playthrough. Yes, we enjoyed the game so much that we immediately started a new game plus after beating it. It happened once over here when we reached these giant double doors and the cutscene that initiates a siege failed to play. At this point, it was impossible to return to a fast travel point due to how the levels function. So we were locked into this level without a way in or out of it. I should stress that we played this on a PS3 emulator because I own the game, but the PS3 was giving me issues with the controller and I just didn't want to get into that. It's a long story. The point is, I initially played this on the 1.0 version of the game, and after some troubleshooting I updated it to version 1.02, thinking this would fix the bug. Unfortunately, it didn't do a thing to help our predicament, but it did fix another annoying bug that prevented us from doing executions with our New Game Plus characters, which by the way is how you initiate a combo chain, which in turn rewards you with XP. So in a sense, yeah, I would say that's another game-breaking bug. And then finally we arrived at the Mirkwood level, and I know those of you who played it just had a cold shiver run down your spine, because this level is notorious for breaking the game. Funny enough, on our second playthrough I had since learned about the bug and thought nothing of it since we got through the first time without a hitch. Lo and behold, it ended up killing our second run, and with it my enthusiasm to play it again. I would have loved to beat it on the hardest difficulty along with the challenge levels, but fixing this bug was a step too far that I was willing to go. It involves deleting patches and backing up save data. It was too annoying, especially after spending what felt like a whole afternoon the day before trying to fix the first bug at the double doors. Out of the 33 hours I have logged into this game, I think about 5 or 6 hours of that has been redoing levels because the cutscene bugged out or the audio broke or trying different fixes to bypass issues. Though I will say, if you're a fan of The Lord of the Rings, then it'll be worth looking into, but try not to do so solo. If you do, be prepared for some shitty AI as teammates. If you have someone who you think is a fun co-op partner, regardless of the game you're playing, then I'd recommend this game. Especially if you enjoy something like Borderlands, and more specifically the character customization and build variety those games offer. Just don't expect it to blow your socks off. To sum it up, the combat was simple yet satisfying and fun, the story was better than I expected with some great voice acting at times, but the standout to me was the loot grind. All the while I was playing, I couldn't help feel the next best piece of loot was just around the corner, and I'm genuinely sad I never got to see the endgame grind for myself. But that's okay. I got a good 1.5 playthroughs in my 30ish hours with what I thought was going to be a throwaway game, so I can't really complain all too much. Speaking of complaints, this is usually where I drop my pros and cons near the end of the video, but I lost the little list I made of all my points I wanted to address when switching to my new phone. And while I can recall some of them off the top of my head, I figured it would be an incomplete list and I'd kick myself every time I remembered a point. So instead, I'll leave it to you to figure out if you want to take the leap and try it out for yourself. Otherwise, let me know in the comments what you think of the Lord of the Rings War in the North. Well, that's going to be it for this one. I want to thank you if you made it this far. You know what to do. Leave a like, leave a sub, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.